While you're getting flagged for a $600 Venmo payment, one tiny European bank branch quietly washed $230 billion for oligarchs and dictators. And regulators? They just looked the other way. Hey, this is Coinrad, and today we're unraveling the biggest laundry cycle in history. It was billions in dirty money flowing through a sleepy little bank that should have had a sign out front saying, "Whites, colors, and oligarch cash accepted." Back in the mid-2000s, Danske Bank, a major Nordic banking group, was expanding its reach across Europe. As part of that expansion, it had acquired a small bank in Estonia, and with it, a sleepy branch located in the capital. Nothing fancy, just a handful of floors, standard desks, and that faint smell of printer toner and bureaucracy. But over the next 8 years, this one little office would quietly handle more than $230 billion in dirty cash. To understand how, we need to take a quick step back. This money wasn't being laundered for local Estonian fishermen or coffee shop owners. Most of it came from non-resident clients, meaning customers who didn't live in Estonia at all. These were shell companies, often based in places like the British Virgin Islands, Cyprus, and the UK, and many of them were linked to Russia, Azerbaijan, and other former Soviet states. On paper, they looked legit. In practice, they had fewer employees than a Taco Bell night shift. Just a mailbox, a shady lawyer, and a bank account full of millions. These non-resident clients were pouring money into the Estonian branch at a rate that should have triggered sirens. In some years, the branch was handling more than 30 billion euros in transactions, much more than the size of Estonia's entire economy. You'd think someone would have asked a few questions, and some did. Inside the bank, red flags were raised. Compliance officers flagged suspicious patterns. External consultants warned that the anti-money laundering systems were weak, but management largely brushed it off. The Estonian branch was profitable, exceptionally profitable. It was generating a big chunk of revenue for the bank. And as long as the money kept flowing, the questions could wait. Here's what the money trail looked like. Funds entered through non-resident accounts, often controlled by anonymous shell companies. The money was moved in complex webs of transactions designed to obscure its origin. Finally, the funds were routed into accounts in Western Europe, the UK, and elsewhere, effectively cleaned by the time they reached their destination. In other words, the money started in Russia or neighboring states, passed through fake companies on paper, landed in a small European bank account, and from there was routed into reputable Western banks, looking squeaky clean by the end. Rinse, repeat, billions of times. There's a name for this kind of scheme. Investigators later called it the Azerbaijani laundromat. And while it wasn't just limited to this one bank, this particular branch was a major hub, arguably the hub, of the operation. At the center of the scandal is a man named Howard Wilkinson. He was a senior staffer at the Estonian branch and began noticing that something smelled off. The transactions didn't make sense. The volumes were insane. The customers were shadowy, and the internal controls were laughable. Wilkinson raised the alarm multiple times, both internally and with regulators. For years, nothing happened. His reports were buried, meetings were postponed, and concern turned into frustration. Eventually, in 2013, he left the bank. But the laundering? That didn't stop. It kept going for another 2 years. It wasn't until 2018, after details leaked to journalists, and regulatory pressure mounted, that the full scope began to emerge. The numbers were jaw-dropping. Over $230 billion in suspicious transactions. That's not a typo. That's almost 80 million a day, every day, for 8 years, flowing through one bank branch, in a country of 1.3 million people. At that point, the fallout began. The bank's CEO resigned. The Estonian branch was shut down entirely. Regulatory investigations were launched across Europe and the United States. The Danish Financial Supervisory Authority slammed the bank for failing to act. Criminal probes followed. Politicians made noise about cracking down on money laundering. You know, the usual, "we are very concerned" energy. But here's the twist. The people responsible went to jail, the laws were fixed, and the entire financial system finally became fair and honest. Just kidding. Despite the size and scope of the scandal, very few people faced real consequences. Some executives lost their jobs. A few fines were issued, but the sheer volume of money moved and the lack of serious accountability left many asking, was this a system failure or the system working as intended? The bigger question is, where did all that money go? And that's where things get murky. Once funds enter the global financial system through enough intermediaries, they become nearly impossible to trace. Investigators believe the money was used to buy real estate, luxury assets, and even political influence across Europe. But much of it simply vanished, dissolved into a fog of shell companies and shadow banking. The fog, by the way, isn't just metaphorical. It's the deliberate design of modern financial systems. The more layers you add, shell companies, trusts, offshore accounts, nominee directors, the harder it becomes to follow the money. By the time the money left that small European bank, it had passed through so many disguises that even the most seasoned investigators were left squinting. And that's the whole point. Money laundering isn't just about washing away the origin. It's about building a maze so complex that nobody wants to go in. Now, let's take a moment to break down the flow of funds, just to see how ludicrous this was. Origin, primarily Russia, Azerbaijan, and other former Soviet states, funds often linked to oligarchs, corrupt officials, or state-backed entities. Layering, sent to UK and Cyprus-based shell companies. Integration, routed into the Estonian branch of the bank via non-resident accounts. Exit, moved into accounts in Western banks, mostly in Germany, the UK, and Nordic countries, where it became virtually indistinguishable from legitimate funds. This is classic textbook laundering. But instead of operating out of a back alley or a casino in Macau, it was running from inside a respectable Nordic bank. That's what made it so effective and so dangerous. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't regulators catch this sooner? Good question, handsome viewer. The answer lies in a cocktail of complacency, complexity, and jurisdictional fog. The Estonian authorities assumed the Danish HQ was watching. The Danes assumed the local branch had it handled. European banking rules were fragmented, cross-border oversight was weak, and everyone was busy with other things, like, not looking into 230 billion. There's also the fact that banks, even with compliance departments, are often incentivized to look away when the numbers are good. This little Estonian branch was wildly profitable. Why rock the boat? And let's be honest, if someone's quietly wiring in tens of millions a day and not bouncing checks, you're not going to start asking existential questions about their shell company's board meeting in a post office box in Gibraltar. So what actually happened as a result? Here's a quick rundown. Danske Bank shut down its Estonian operations. Multiple investigations were opened across Europe and the US. The bank was charged in several countries, including by the US Department of Justice. In 2022, Danske pled guilty to bank fraud in the US and agreed to forfeit $2 billion. Some individuals were charged, including mid-level managers. But no top executives went to prison, and most of the money was never recovered. So after all that, did anything change? Yes and no. The scandal did help push forward tougher EU anti-money laundering rules, and it increased pressure on Western banks to scrutinize non-resident accounts and high-risk clients more closely. But global financial systems are still incredibly leaky and full of loopholes. Shell companies are still cheap and easy to set up, and billions still move across borders every day, without anyone really knowing who's behind the transactions. The lesson here isn't just that one bank failed. It's that the entire system is vulnerable, especially when the incentives are aligned with not asking questions. And for all the headlines and hearings and hand-wringing, one uncomfortable truth lingers. This probably isn't the last scandal of its kind. In fact, it may not even be the biggest anymore, just the most visible one to date. Because in the world of global finance, the real action rarely happens on the surface. It's always moving through hidden tunnels, quiet, fast, and very, very clean by the time it reappears. This is Coinrad. Hit subscribe and stick around for more stories about money, markets, and the madness they create.